Welcome to this very special edition of the KJ Masterclass Live, the show which ensures that you profit from your time spent here with experts, either through their insights, information, or simply learning from them. And today we have Jim Ruff. He is a social innovator, founder of the Center for Wise Democracy. Welcome to the show, Jim.
Thank you, AJ. Nice to be here.
Welcome. Welcome to the show. Welcome to India in this online form, Jim. And I'm sure not just in India, but a lot of people across the globe will benefit from what we are going to talk about. We'll talk about democracy. We'll talk about breakthrough solutions for a divided society that's happening at a lot of places. In this backdrop, we'll have our conversation. But before that, let's understand a bit more about you for the audience, about your background, about your journey, so that people know a bit better who they are listening to.
Sure. Well, I I was a physics major in college, and but I became much more interested in how people think and how they talk and how they make collective decisions, and especially I became interested in solving impossible to solve problems. It always occurred to me that if people have creativity, then we ought to be applying that to the what seems impossible to solve. And so I began to do some research on that, and I taught seminars for many years on basically on that, but I called it dynamic facilitation. In other words, how do we facilitate people so that they face the issues that are most important to them that seem impossible, and how do they have breakthroughs and shifts and understanding and feelings so that they rise above it. So I taught seminars, and then in the seminars I got excited about some of the breakthroughs that were happening. People would practice on problems from society, like healthcare or um, climate change or whatever, and they would have breakthroughs. And some of these have led me on a story of trying to figure out, okay, now I've got all these breakthroughs. What do I do with them? And they came together for me. And one third about 30 years ago, and I ever since I've been saying, oh my goodness, this our society can't make it, and we have to. Um, and here's a way to fix it. Here's a way to move to the next system.
Absolutely. Move to the next system. So let's understand that better for the audience. You talk about, American democracy is collapsing. A breakthrough is needed. Why do you think the world's, biggest democracy is collapsing? Why so despondent here, Jim?
Well, it isn't really a democracy. That what we need is democracy. It was set up to be a constitutional republic in the U.S., and it was a fantastic founding experience. Basically, I think I talk about the triangle system and the box system and the circle system. And the triangle is the authoritarian type system, and the box is where you have a social contract in place instead of some leader, the dear leader. And what's the box can't really survive. We call it democracy, but it's really a constitutional republic. And so, but it structures when you set up a social contract as the ultimate authority for a system instead of the dear leader, and that's what they did. They put the Constitution there, and it was a marvelous beginning. But you've really set up the rules of the game, and so our box system, or our what we call democracy, is really a competition based system, and we have to start working together. We have to have a different kind of conversation. We need to work. We need to be creative together to solve these seemingly impossible to solve problems.
Right. But still, I'm yet to understand from you, Jim, is that okay, it was a contract, whatever at that point in time, if I understand, those great leaders of those times thought was best, went for it. Later on, other systems came in, again, there also people have different questions and understanding to be made. So is it that we are looking at a not the human mindset, but we are looking at utopia, and utopia cannot be achieved with so many, because when we are individuals, we talk of utopia. When it benefits us, we like that system. Help us understand in that backdrop, Jim, because people have loved this democracy. They have gone gaga everywhere. Not only, praised this democracy, but have also gone along with whatever decisions the governments took and went into deep into other territories in the name of preserving democracy. So I want to understand then, why did discord? Why not one voice?
One voice? Yes, I think that's right. What's missing is the conversation where we talk respectfully and creatively. We all take time out every so often and we talk with respect to one another and we face the problems and we come up with answers. And then we, the people, provide leadership to government and to the market and to the culture, all of us. And that conversation, that unitary voice is missing. What we've structured instead is this fight between the special interests. And I'm not sure, I don't know enough about the Indian democracy structure, but basically in the US, we have two parties and it's crazy. That worked really well, I think, in the past, but now uh, the special interests have really taken over. It's not really the Constitution in charge anymore. It's really the special interests in charge, and so it's actually more of an oligarchy. Yeah.
Okay, okay. So now you have named it much more clearly, special interests. And you are saying now special interests have taken over. Uh, when was it when interests did not take over, when it was really a democracy? Let's look at, you talked about, two party system. Americans talk about China also. They buy a lot of products there when it suits them, and then they tell it's a one party system, closed system. So that's where I said, whenever you suit, it suits people everywhere in the world. They use different terms. Even for Russia, they say it's a closed system, it's an oligarchy. And in as you said, even in the US now, special interests have taken over. Everywhere it's the special interest. So
Yes.
you also, where is the solution then? Because you also talk about that our society is in trouble. It's in a mess. So help us understand in this, where will the solution come from, Jim?
Yes, we have just very little time, I know. So, but I think one way to think about it is I think all indigenous peoples, I mean, you and I have that in our background as well. And and all indigenous peoples understood they were interdependent. And so they understood that they had to have everybody on board in some way. And so they would have a wisdom council. They would have a take time out to think about the big issues, and they would basically just talk until it was self-evident what we all felt and what we needed to do. And that conversation, that is a different kind of conversation than is structured when you have a social contract. A social contract sets up this disagree, agree kind of conversation uh, with and you're trying to be deliberative or whatever, but it but that's not the conversation we need. We need that heartfelt, respectful, creative, collaborative conversation where we recognize our interdependence and we seek unity, and that can be facilitated. It's possible to facilitate that. And if you do this, if you facilitate a meeting, for instance, AJ, and there's just a few people in the room, they may not notice, but everybody's thinking at a higher level. All we need to do is go down to the store and buy an amplifier so that we do that for the nation. And we need to do that for the world. We need to We need to do that amplifier thing where we facilitate a times out where everybody thinks at this high level, comes to some kind of unity, and this can be done. And I think the way to, I can't explain really now, but in the website, I think it would be a good chance to explore that, because I have, pages for national wisdom. I call them the wisdom council process at the national level, or at the global level, or at the local level. So people can, once they understand some of the concepts, you can just do it locally too. So, and maybe you're more familiar with it in the Indian culture than we are in the American culture.
Everywhere the option is there, but you see, uh Jim, uh I'm very optimistic. You also seem optimistic, but the problem here is, as I said before, that as long as the interests serve us, we are ready to go with whatever is happening. As soon as that interest, and then we say it's the others who are doing wrong things.
Yes,
For
yes,
example, for
yes,
example, mainstream media nowadays has in its own challenges. Why? Because people are not trusting it the way it used to before, and because people are not buying newspapers or watching television like it used to. Why? Because people do not want to see things which they do not trust. But at the same time, the same people who accuse the mainstream media for this, they go down to all those social media sites and engage in all those toxic discussions and give power to those so-called people. So you see, from mainstream media, from the real gatekeepers, the true gatekeepers, who have become the gatekeepers now? All these social media heads. Will they save democracy? They will not. So
yes,
what we are doing is, we are not disengaging ourselves from toxic discussions and getting into discussions which are good. Content is not getting a lot of attention because, you know why? The interest is that someone thinks that if there is a so-called viral content going on, however toxic it is, I will go and put in my thought even if nobody reads it, but they think they will piggyback on that so-called viral content. This
yes,
is self-interest. This is how it is working, and this
yes,
is where, it is not serving anyone. And again, the
yes,
same people will come in the real world and tell, I don't want to be a part of this cancel culture. I don't want to live in this toxic world. But in
yes,
the another universe, they are creating five different profiles, all different, and engaging in all these toxic activities.
yes.
How do you separate the two sides of human beings here? We are selfless, we are also very, very selfish. That is why
So
I said,
I'm
how
out
do we
time
do this?
because I agree with everything you said except the last statement, and that is, of course, we're selfish, but we're also desperately wanting to serve the public interest, and our system structures self-interest. So, and that wasn't so bad. If everybody's independent, then you can maximize your own well-being, pursue your own happiness, and that works out pretty good if we're not interdependent. But the more interdependent we become in our current society, so everything you were saying wrong to me is in the current system. And if you and I somehow can facilitate a shift, because it's what you were describing as a kind of thinking that our system generates. And if you and I go into the behind the curtain here and make a slight change, which just adds this whole system, I call it a choice creating conversation, just add that. Well, now we're in reality is different. We've just changed reality. So for instance, if you go to a basketball game or something, or soccer, you might be screaming at the ref, or being you might be jumping up and down, whatever. But then you go to a church or some religious setting, sacred setting, and you're not that way. It's inappropriate, so you don't do that. And I'm just saying that if you and I can change the context, then we get a different motivations, we get different behaviors on people. And that can be done just by adding this bit of conversation, what I call a choice creating conversation. One ongoing whole system choice, global choice creating conversation, just adding it to what we already have. And what happened now, we're in a conversation where we're trying to reach unity. We're trying to figure out what's best for everybody. And once that conversation is in place, well, now the game, it's like playing basketball and then you quit playing basketball. You stop. You come out and you all visit with everybody and talk about it. In other words, a real life is outside of the game, not in the game. And we've got a structure that gets us, we think people are greedy. We think people are self-interested. Well, yeah, in the game they are.
Right. So are people still in this game of democracy? Because you said it's a contract and self-interests have taken over. Do you think the general public can fight back, take back the power in their hands? How do you do that?
Well,
How,
it's
how
not.
are you working on the ground?
Yes, it's not about us versus them, okay? In other words, what all we're doing is setting up a new kind of conversation where we're all in it. There's no us and them. There's just the all the special interests, all the people. In other words, what we do is we randomly select just 12 to 16 people, say from the world population, and we bring them together. Just these people. They don't know anything. They haven't been, and we give them an issue like I don't know whatever, the distribute poverty or distribution of wealth or women's rights or something. You and they talk for just a couple days, 3 days maybe, and they will come up to you because of the way we facilitate. They will end those 3 days with excited that how did you get these people to come together? They don't realize it's the process. They think it's the people that we selected. No, they're random. But and when they speak, they tell the story of how they made this progress. And then the audience that hears this, they break into small groups. And what's your reaction? And we do it in a way that everybody meets in small groups and thinks in this similar way. And generally what happens is people say, yeah, why aren't we doing that? What? Of course we want to preserve planet Earth. Of course we want to, I'm willing to sacrifice, but if only if everybody does, it's all of this, a new common sense emerges. And this is possible. And of course, I think you might know that some states of Austria, two states of Austria have adopted it into their constitutions. And so we're getting some experience. We've done a lot of experiments with this, and it works. It's not a problem. The only reason why it doesn't, people don't think it works is because they imagine it's human nature to be self-interested. No, it's our system. It structures that. It's you play basketball, and they say, "Well, geez, AJ, you're 20 points ahead your team. You should give up 15 points to the other team." You're going to say, "No, of course not. We're playing a game here. What are you thinking?" But there's outside the game. Outside the game, of course we share. That's what we need to do is create that doorway outside to get out of this mess.
Right. In terms of help from the political system, do you think people should expect this sort of change, this sort of support to strengthen democracy, or they have to do it independently of whichever system it
Independently.
is?
Independently. When I wrote my book 20 some years ago, I call it Society's Breakthrough. Um, I thought it required an amendment to the US Constitution to get it for the United States. And now, no, I don't. I mean, I think that will actually happen as the last step, but not the first step. I think that once we start, I think just a small group, I call them just us, can start this. We need enough money, we need enough media support, but we can just do it. And then if you once you randomly select people and they reach unity about issues, and then others turn their chairs and they say, "Yeah, why aren't we doing that?" Elected officials get it. Oh, this is the way the wind is blowing. I have to and I have to jump in front of the parade and say I've been thinking about this all along. You know, it gets silly.
Right, right. Uh, do you think with the new administration coming in the US very soon, democracy will be strengthened or weakened?
Well, both. I think it's a disaster. I think that the current, I really think the box system is going to disassemble, and but the and so people, it might even make sense to go back away from what we call democracy to the authoritarian system. But what we really need to do is go forward to real democracy, and that I think this process, what I call the Wisdom Council process, can do that, can facilitate that. So the bad part is what is happening within the box system and the retreat to what I think of as dystopia, the triangle system. But but I'm actually very optimistic because people finally can start hearing me. They're interested now because they don't know any other options, and so I'm pretty excited about the new level of interest in the idea of going to facilitating the next system.
Absolutely. There's much to understand about these things from you, Jim, and I'm sure a lot of people would like to connect with you, learn more from you, about you, learn more from your book. What is the best way for them to do so?
Well, I think the first thing would be to to take a look at wisedemocracy.org. That's the that's the website, and we've got videos and seminars. Everything's free, and articles, and I mean it's mostly me writing and me doing interviews and things like that. But we have a group now finally, that we call Just Us, that's going to maybe create a global Wisdom Council process, which is something that I think has to happen. We have to become collectively intelligent, as as a global population in dealing with these problems, like climate change and I don't know, pandemics and AI and all these things. There has to be a we the people globally to think these things through and then provide leadership to the different nations and to the economy. We can't be led by money. Money, the game for money. Heck, that's what we already lost that. You and I lost that already. There's people that have so much money now, they won, but the game is still going on, even though it should be over. Uh, so how is there a we that can say, "Oh, let's not play this anymore. Let's go to the next stage of life?"
Right. Next stage of life. Let's hope for the best, Jim, and look at how the next stage looks like, especially in the backdrop of the strengthening self-serving interest as well as AI and all these things coming on. Be that as it may, it's nice talking to you, and I'm sure a lot of people would connect with you. With this, it's a wrap on this very special edition of the KJ Masterclass Live. Thank you so much indeed for joining us.
Thank you, AJ. That was really nice.